Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadowy kitchens of ancient Egypt, where the air hangs thick with the pungent aroma of freshly peeled onions and the gentle scrape of bronze knives against wooden cutting boards echoes through limestone chambers. You can almost feel the cool stone beneath your feet as you walk through these culinary sanctuaries, watching as skilled hands work tirelessly under the flickering glow of oil lamps, their movements rhythmic and practiced, slicing through layer after layer of these sacred bulbs. Sharp scent fills your nostrils, and you realize that what you're witnessing isn't just cooking. It's devotion, ritual, an obsession that runs so deep through Egyptian culture that you probably won't survive 5 minutes in one of these kitchens without your eyes streaming tears of both physical discomfort and overwhelming respect for these ancient culinary masters. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love knowing you're out there, sharing this quiet moment with me across time and space. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in the grand kitchen of a pharaoh's palace, somewhere along the fertile banks of the Nile around 2500 BCE. The morning sun streams through high windows, casting long rectangles of golden light across the expansive workspace. Before you stretches a scene that would make any modern chef pause in wonder. Dozens of workers moving with practiced efficiency, their linen garments pristine white against the warm sandstone walls. But what strikes you most immediately isn't the scale of the operation or the obvious wealth displayed in every bronze vessel and ivory-handled tool. It's the onions. Everywhere you look, there are onions. Baskets upon baskets of them line the walls. Some small and pearl white, others large and golden brown. Their papery skins rustling softly in the morning breeze that drifts through the kitchen. The head cook, a woman whose weathered hands speak of decades spent in service to the royal household, moves between her assistants with the quiet authority of someone who understands that feeding Pharaoh is not merely about sustenance. It's about maintaining the cosmic order itself. You watch as she selects an onion from a particularly prized basket, holding it up to the light and examining it with the same intensity a jeweler might reserve for a precious gem. She nods approvingly and passes it to a young apprentice, who begins the meditative process of peeling away the outer layers with a knife so sharp it seems to whisper through the onion's skin. The smell that rises from this simple act is intoxicating, not the harsh bite you might expect, but something deeper, more complex, like earth and sunshine and the promise of transformation. This is your first glimpse into understanding why ancient Egyptians didn't just use onions in their cooking. They revered them. To comprehend the depth of this obsession, you need to understand that in ancient Egypt, food was never merely fuel for the body. Every meal was a communion with the gods, every ingredient a sacred offering, every kitchen a temple, where the mysteries of life and death played out in the daily drama of preparation and consumption. The onion, with its concentric layers and ability to bring tears to the eyes, represented something profound to the Egyptian mind. As you observe the kitchen workers, you begin to see how they handle these humble vegetables with an almost religious reverence. They don't simply chop them, they meditate upon them. Each cut is deliberate, each slice a prayer offered to the gods who govern fertility, rebirth, and the eternal cycle of life. You notice that the onions aren't just ingredients here. They're everywhere in Egyptian society. Walk through any Egyptian home of this period, from the grandest palace to the humblest mud brick dwelling, and you'll find onions hanging in braided strands from the rafters, their presence as constant and comforting as the rhythm of the Nile's flood cycle. Children grow up understanding that onions aren't just food. They're protection, medicine, and spiritual guides rolled into one perfect layered package. The fascination begins to make sense when you consider the onion's most distinctive characteristic, its layers. To an ancient Egyptian, these concentric rings weren't just a botanical curiosity. They were a physical manifestation of eternity itself. Just as the onion could be peeled layer by layer without ever truly reaching an end, so too did the Egyptians believe that existence continued in endless cycles of death and rebirth. The onion became a symbol of eternal life, which explains why archaeologists regularly find them carefully placed in burial chambers, nestled alongside pharaohs and commoners alike as they prepared for their journey into the afterlife. You're beginning to understand that calling it an obsession might actually be an understatement. This was a civilization that saw the divine in everything around them, and in the humble onion they found perhaps the most perfect symbol of their deepest spiritual beliefs. The tears that came from cutting onions weren't seen as an inconvenience. They were considered purifying, a physical manifestation of the emotional release that comes with spiritual transformation. As you continue watching the kitchen workers, you notice how they incorporate onions into virtually every dish. There's a large pot simmering over the fire where onions form the base of what appears to be a stew, their translucent pieces floating like small ghosts in the rich, dark broth. At another station, a cook is stuffing a duck with a mixture that seems to be primarily composed of minced onions, herbs, and grains. The combination filling the air with an aroma that makes your stomach growl despite the early hour. But it's not just the cooking that fascinates you. It's the ceremony surrounding it. You watch as one of the senior cooks takes a particularly beautiful onion and places it on a small altar set into an alcove in the kitchen wall. She lights a stick of incense and murmurs what sounds like a prayer before returning to her work. This isn't superstition. It's recognition of the sacred nature of the ingredients they work with daily. The medical applications become apparent as you observe a corner of the kitchen where an elderly man sits with what appears to be a minor injury to his hand. One of the cooks approaches him with a freshly cut onion and begins applying the juice directly to the wound. You realize you're witnessing ancient medicine in action. The antiseptic properties of onions were well known to these people, and they used them to treat everything from cuts and burns to more serious infections. The preservation methods they employed were equally sophisticated. You see workers carefully layering onions in large clay vessels, alternating them with salt and dried herbs in a process that would keep the vegetables fresh for months. This wasn't just practical food storage, it was a form of alchemy, transforming simple ingredients into something that could sustain life during the long months when fresh produce wasn't available. As the morning progresses, you begin to understand the social significance of onions in Egyptian culture. The quality and quantity of onions in a household's stores were markers of wealth and status. A family that could afford to keep large quantities of the finest onions was demonstrating their prosperity to the community. The onions weren't just food. They were currency, medicine, spiritual protection, and social signaling, all wrapped up in one versatile package. You watch as a messenger arrives at the kitchen, carrying what appears to be an order from another noble household. The head cook examines the list carefully, and you see her nod approvingly when she reaches what must be the onion specifications. She leads the messenger to the storage area where hundreds of onions hang in neat rows, organized by size, variety, and age. The selection process is meticulous. Each onion is examined, weighed, and evaluated before being approved for inclusion in the order. This attention to detail reveals something important about Egyptian culture. They understood that excellence in the small things led to excellence in the great things. The care they took in selecting, preparing, and using onions was the same care they brought to building pyramids, mummifying pharaohs, and maintaining the complex systems that kept their civilization thriving for thousands of years. The spiritual dimension becomes even more apparent as you observe the evening meal preparation. The head cook gathers her staff around a large table where dozens of onions have been arranged in a specific pattern. She begins to speak, and though you can't understand the ancient Egyptian words, the reverent tone makes it clear that this is some form of blessing or dedication. Each cook takes an onion from the arrangement and holds it while the blessing continues, their faces serious and focused. You realize you're witnessing a daily ritual that connects these kitchen workers to something larger than themselves. The onions aren't just ingredients. They're conduits to the divine physical representations of the spiritual beliefs that govern every aspect of Egyptian life. The act of preparing them for meals is simultaneously practical and sacred, a daily reaffirmation of the connection between the physical and spiritual worlds. The preservation of this tradition across generations becomes clear as you watch the interactions between the older, experienced cooks and their younger apprentices. The knowledge being passed down isn't just about technique, it's about understanding the deeper significance of what they're doing. A young apprentice doesn't just learn how to properly dice an onion. She learns why the cuts should be made in a particular pattern, how the number of layers reveals information about the coming harvest, and what prayers should be offered during the preparation process. This educational process extends beyond the kitchen walls. Egyptian children grew up understanding that onions were special, that they deserved respect and careful handling. Parents would teach their children to identify the best onions at the market, to store them properly at home, and to use them judiciously in both cooking and medicine. This wasn't just practical education, it was cultural transmission, ensuring that the deep respect for onions would continue from one generation to the next. The economic importance of onions in ancient Egypt becomes evident as you observe the trading activities that take place throughout the day. Merchants arrive with caravans carrying onions from different regions, each variety prized for its particular characteristics. Some onions are valued for their medicinal properties, others for their keeping quality, and still others for their superior flavor when cooked. The negotiations over these precious bulbs are as intense as any modern commodity trading, with prices fluctuating based on quality, scarcity, and seasonal availability. You begin to understand that the Egyptian onion trade was a sophisticated network that connected different regions of the empire and beyond. Onions from the Delta region were prized for their sweetness, while those from the southern provinces were valued for their intensity and preservation qualities. This trade network wasn't just about commerce, it was about maintaining the cultural and spiritual practices that depended on having access to the right types of onions for different purposes. The religious ceremonies involving onions reveal another layer of their cultural significance. You observe as priests arrive at the kitchen to collect specially prepared onions for use in temple rituals. These aren't just any onions. They've been selected according to strict criteria and prepared following ancient protocols that ensure their spiritual purity. The transfer of these sacred onions from kitchen to temple is conducted with the same solemnity that might accompany any other religious sacrament. The connection between onions and the afterlife becomes particularly poignant as you witness the preparation of food for a funeral feast. The family of a recently deceased nobleman has requested a specific menu that incorporates onions in every course, from appetizers to desserts. The kitchen staff approaches this task with extra reverence, understanding that these onions will play a role in the deceased's journey to the afterlife. Each layer peeled away is like a prayer, each cut a wish for safe passage through the underworld. The seasonal rhythms of Egyptian life are intimately connected to the onion harvest. You observe how the arrival of fresh onions from the fields transforms the energy of the kitchen. There's excitement in the air as the first baskets of the new crop arrive, their skins still dusty from the fields where they grew. The cooks examine them with the enthusiasm of connoisseurs, discussing the subtle differences in color, size, and aroma that mark this year's harvest as either exceptional or merely adequate. This seasonal celebration extends throughout Egyptian society. Families plan special meals around the arrival of fresh onions, and the markets fill with buyers eager to secure the best specimens for their households. The onion harvest isn't just an agricultural event. It's a cultural celebration that reinforces the connection between the Egyptian people and the land that sustains them. The medicinal applications of onions in ancient Egypt were far more extensive than you might initially imagine. You watch as a healer arrives at the kitchen to consult with the head cook about preparing onion-based remedies for various ailments. They discuss different varieties and preparation methods with the precision of modern pharmacists, understanding that the therapeutic effects of onions could be enhanced or diminished depending on how they were processed and combined with other ingredients. The respiratory benefits were particularly well understood. You observe the preparation of onion steam treatments for people suffering from breathing difficulties, the careful extraction of onion juice for cough remedies, and the creation of onion poultices for chest congestion. These weren't folk remedies based on superstition. They were sophisticated medical treatments based on centuries of careful observation and experimentation. The digestive applications were equally important. Egyptian cooks knew that onions could settle upset stomachs, improve appetite, and aid in the digestion of rich foods. You watch as they prepare special onion broths for people recovering from illness, understanding that the gentle warmth and mild antiseptic properties would help restore health without overwhelming a weakened system. The preservation techniques used by ancient Egyptian cooks reveal a sophisticated understanding of food science that wouldn't look out of place in a modern kitchen. You observe the careful process of dehydrating onions in the desert sun, creating concentrated flakes that could be stored for months without spoiling. The knowledge of how to control moisture, prevent fermentation, and maintain nutritional value represents generations of accumulated wisdom. The fermentation processes are equally impressive. You watch as cooks prepare fermented onion pastes that will serve both as condiments and as probiotics to support digestive health. The timing and conditions required for these fermentations are monitored with scientific precision, even though the underlying biochemistry wouldn't be understood for thousands of years. The social rituals surrounding onions extend into every aspect of Egyptian life. You observe wedding preparations where onions play a central role in the ceremonial feast, their presence symbolizing the layers of commitment and growth that the marriage represents. The bride and groom participate in a ritual where they each peel an onion together, the tears that result being interpreted as a cleansing that prepares them for their new life together. Birth celebrations also incorporate onions in meaningful ways. New mothers are given special onion-based broths to help them recover their strength, while the baby's room is blessed with onions hung in protective arrangements. These traditions aren't just customs, they're expressions of the deep belief that onions possess protective and nurturing properties that can safeguard the most vulnerable members of society. The artistic representations of onions in Egyptian culture reveal their elevated status in the civilization's symbolic vocabulary. You notice decorative elements throughout the kitchen that incorporate onion motifs, carved reliefs showing the layered structure, painted murals depicting the harvest and preparation processes, and even jewelry worn by the senior staff that features onion-inspired designs. These artistic elements aren't mere decoration. They're visual reminders of the spiritual significance of the work being performed in the kitchen. Every cook who enters the space is reminded that they're participating in something larger than food preparation. They're maintaining traditions that connect them to the gods, to their ancestors, and to the eternal cycles of life and death. The training of new cooks reveals the depth of knowledge required to properly work with onions in ancient Egypt. You observe a master cook instructing an apprentice in the subtle art of onion selection, teaching her to identify the characteristics that mark a superior specimen. The lesson covers not just practical matters like size and firmness, but also spiritual considerations like the arrangement of the layers and the quality of the tears produced during cutting. The apprentice learns that different onions are appropriate for different purposes, some for raw preparations where their bite provides essential flavor contrast, others for long cooking where their sweetness will develop and deepen. She discovers that the time of day when onions are harvested affects their storage life, that the phase of the moon influences their spiritual potency, and that the prayers offered during preparation can enhance their beneficial properties. The international trade in onions reveals ancient Egypt's sophisticated understanding of global commerce. You observe merchants from distant lands arriving with exotic onion varieties unknown in Egypt, their precious cargo carefully examined by expert evaluators who can determine origin, quality, and fair value with remarkable precision. These foreign onions aren't just curiosities, they're valuable additions to the Egyptian culinary repertoire, each variety offering unique characteristics that expand the possibilities for both cooking and medicine. The diplomatic significance of onion exchanges becomes apparent as you witness the preparation of gifts for foreign dignitaries. The selection of onions for these diplomatic offerings requires careful consideration of the recipient's cultural background and the political message being conveyed. The finest specimens are chosen not just for their quality, but for their symbolic appropriateness, ensuring that the gift will be received with the respect and understanding it deserves. The seasonal storage techniques demonstrate the Egyptian mastery of food preservation that allowed their civilization to thrive in a challenging environment. You watch as workers prepare underground storage chambers, carefully controlling temperature and humidity to create optimal conditions for long-term onion preservation. The process involves not just practical considerations like ventilation and moisture control, but also spiritual elements like protective spells and ritual purification of the storage space. The rotation systems used to ensure freshness are equally sophisticated. Different varieties of onions are stored according to their keeping qualities, with the most perishable varieties used first and the longest-lasting reserves held back for times of scarcity. This systematic approach to food security represents the kind of long-term planning that allowed Egyptian civilization to survive and prosper through cycles of abundance and famine. The role of onions in Egyptian literature and poetry reveals their place in the culture's intellectual life. You hear scribes reciting verses that use onion imagery to explore themes of hidden beauty, gradual revelation, and the rewards of patient exploration. The metaphor of peeling away layers to reach deeper truths becomes a common literary device, connecting the physical act of onion preparation to the intellectual pursuit of wisdom and understanding. The educational value of onions extends into mathematics and geometry, where their concentric structure provides a natural model for teaching concepts of circles, radii, and proportional relationships. Young students learn to count and calculate using onions as concrete examples, their hands-on experience with these familiar objects, making abstract concepts more accessible and memorable. The technological innovations inspired by onion processing reveal the Egyptian genius for practical problem solving. You observe specialized tools designed specifically for onion preparation, knives with particular blade shapes that minimize cell damage and reduce tear production, cutting boards with channels to collect and direct onion juices, and storage containers designed to maintain optimal humidity levels for different onion varieties. The development of these specialized tools represents more than just convenience. It demonstrates the Egyptian commitment to excellence in every aspect of their cultural practices. The investment of time and resources in perfecting onion-related technology shows how seriously they took their culinary and spiritual responsibilities. The healing traditions associated with onions reveal a sophisticated understanding of holistic medicine that addressed physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being simultaneously. You observe healers preparing complex onion-based remedies that combine multiple varieties with other herbs and minerals, creating treatments tailored to individual patients' specific needs and constitutions. The diagnostic uses of onions are particularly intriguing. Healers would sometimes have patients consume specific preparations and then observe their reactions to gain insights into underlying health conditions. The belief that onions could reveal hidden imbalances in the body's systems represents an early form of functional medicine that focused on understanding root causes rather than just treating symptoms. The agricultural practices surrounding onion cultivation demonstrate the Egyptian mastery of irrigation, soil management, and crop rotation that made their civilization possible. You learn about the careful timing of plantings to coincide with Nile flood cycles, the selection and improvement of varieties through careful seed saving, and the integration of onion cultivation with other crops to maximize soil fertility and pest control. The sacred geometry found in onion field layouts reveals the connection between agricultural practice and spiritual belief. Fields are arranged according to mathematical principles that were believed to enhance both crop productivity and spiritual harmony, creating agricultural landscapes that functioned as large-scale temples dedicated to the gods of fertility and abundance. The festival celebrations centered around onions provide glimpses into the joyful aspects of Egyptian culture. You witness community gatherings, where the onion harvest is celebrated with music, dancing, and feasting. The entire community coming together to honor the gifts of the earth and the hard work of the farmers who tend it. These celebrations aren't just parties. They're essential social rituals that reinforce community bonds and shared values. The The act of coming together to celebrate something as humble as an onion demonstrates the Egyptian understanding that the sacred is found not in grand gestures, but in the daily miracles of growth, nourishment, and community support. The export trade in Egyptian onions reveals the international reputation these products enjoyed in the ancient world. You observe the careful packaging of premium onions for shipment to distant markets, where Egyptian varieties commanded high prices due to their superior quality and the sophisticated cultivation methods used to produce them. The cultural influence that accompanied these trade relationships helped spread Egyptian onion cultivation techniques and culinary traditions throughout the Mediterranean world and beyond. Egyptian cooking methods, preservation techniques, and even spiritual beliefs about onions found their way into other cultures, creating a lasting legacy that influenced world cuisine for centuries to come. The record-keeping systems used to track onion production, storage, and distribution demonstrate the Egyptian mastery of administrative organization that made their complex civilization possible. You observe scribes carefully documenting every aspect of onion-related activities, from field yields and storage conditions to distribution patterns and consumption rates. These records weren't just bureaucratic exercises, they were essential tools for managing resources, predicting needs, and ensuring that the spiritual and practical requirements for onions could be met consistently. The detailed tracking of onion-related activities provides modern archaeologists with invaluable insights into daily life in ancient Egypt. The architectural elements, designed specifically for onion storage and processing, reveal the integration of functional and aesthetic considerations that characterized Egyptian design. You observe storage facilities that are both practical and beautiful, their forms inspired by the natural geometry of the onions they're designed to protect. The ventilation systems, humidity controls, and structural elements of these specialized buildings represent engineering solutions that were both effective and elegant. The fact that such care was taken in designing facilities for something as humble as onion storage demonstrates the Egyptian understanding that excellence in small things contributes to excellence in great things. The philosophical discussions surrounding onions reveal their place in Egyptian intellectual life. You overhear scholars debating the symbolic significance of onion layers, using them as metaphors for exploring questions about the nature of reality, the structure of the cosmos, and the relationship between appearance and essence. These intellectual explorations weren't mere abstract exercises. They were serious attempts to understand fundamental questions about existence, using the familiar example of onions as a starting point. The accessibility of onion symbolism made complex philosophical concepts more understandable to ordinary people, democratizing wisdom in a way that was characteristic of Egyptian culture. The therapeutic applications extend beyond physical healing to include emotional and spiritual treatments. You observe counselors using onion preparation as a form of meditation therapy, teaching troubled individuals to find peace and clarity through the rhythmic contemplative process of working with these healing plants. The belief that onions could absorb negative emotions and spiritual impurities led to their use in purification rituals, designed to cleanse both individuals and spaces of harmful influences. These practices weren't based on superstition. They were sophisticated applications of principles that modern psychology is only beginning to understand about the relationship between physical activity, emotional processing, and spiritual well-being. The intergenerational transmission of onion-related knowledge reveals the Egyptian commitment to preserving and advancing their cultural achievements. You observe grandparents teaching grandchildren not just the practical skills of onion cultivation and preparation, but also the stories, songs, and spiritual meanings that give these activities their deeper significance. This educational process ensures that each generation doesn't just inherit techniques, they inherit understanding. The wisdom accumulated over centuries of working with onions is passed down not as rigid rules, but as living traditions that can be adapted and improved while maintaining their essential character. The artistic inspiration drawn from onions influences multiple forms of creative expression throughout Egyptian culture. You observe musicians composing songs that use onion imagery to explore themes of hidden beauty and gradual revelation, their melodies structured to mirror the layered complexity of their subject matter. Visual artists create works that celebrate the geometric perfection of onion structure, using these natural forms as inspiration for everything from jewelry design to architectural elements. The mathematical relationships found in onion layers provide a source of aesthetic principles that influence Egyptian art for generations. The economic theories developed around onion production and trade contribute to Egyptian understanding of value, scarcity, and market dynamics. You observe merchants and administrators discussing pricing strategies, supply chain management, and quality control measures with a sophistication that wouldn't be out of place in modern business schools. The principles developed through onion commerce, concepts like differentiated pricing based on quality, seasonal adjustment of supply chains, and customer relationship management, influence Egyptian business practices across all sectors of their economy. The scientific observations made during onion cultivation and processing contribute to Egyptian understanding of botany. You watch researchers carefully documenting the relationships between growing conditions and onion characteristics, building a body of knowledge that represents some of the earliest systematic agricultural science. The experimental methods used to test new cultivation techniques, preservation methods, and medicinal applications demonstrate the Egyptian commitment to evidence-based practice. Their willingness to question traditional methods and test new approaches represents a scientific attitude that contributes to their civilization's remarkable achievements. The spiritual practices centered around onions provide pathways for individual and communal connection with the divine. You observe meditation practices that use onion peeling as a metaphor for spiritual purification, the physical act of removing layers becoming a ritual representation of shedding worldly attachments. The communal rituals that incorporate onions create shared experiences that bind communities together in common purpose and belief. These practices aren't just religious observances. They're social technologies that create the cohesion necessary for complex civilizations to function effectively. The linguistic influences of onion culture appear throughout Egyptian language and literature. You notice how onion-related metaphors and idioms permeate everyday speech, providing a rich vocabulary for discussing concepts of depth, hidden qualities, and gradual revelation that extends far beyond culinary contexts. The development of specialized terminology for different aspects of onion cultivation, preparation, and use demonstrates the precision of Egyptian thinking about these important cultural elements. The existence of dozens of words for different types, qualities, and uses of onions reveals a culture that took these distinctions seriously and valued precise communication about them. The technological innovations inspired by onion processing influence developments in other areas of Egyptian life. You observe how tools and techniques developed for onion preparation are adapted for use with other foods, how storage methods perfected for onions are applied to other perishables, and how the organizational systems developed for onion commerce are used in other trade sectors. The cross-pollination of ideas and techniques demonstrates the dynamic nature of Egyptian innovation, where improvements in one area regularly lead to advances in others. The practical lessons learned from working with onions contribute to the overall technological sophistication that makes Egyptian civilization possible. The diplomatic protocols surrounding onion gifts and exchanges reveal their significance in international relations. You observe the careful attention paid to selecting appropriate onion varieties for different foreign dignitaries, the ceremonial aspects of onion presentations, and the negotiation of onion trade agreements as components of larger diplomatic initiatives. The respect shown for Egyptian onion culture by foreign visitors demonstrates the international recognition of Egyptian achievements in this area. The fact that other civilizations sought to learn from Egyptian onion practices shows how these humble vegetables became ambassadors for Egyptian culture as a whole. The environmental considerations involved in onion cultivation contribute to Egyptian understanding of sustainable agriculture and resource management. You observe farming practices that maintain soil fertility, conserve water resources, and protect biodiversity while maximizing onion production. The long-term thinking that characterizes Egyptian onion agriculture, consideration of soil health, water table management, and ecosystem balance, reflects a civilization that understood the importance of sustainability long before the term was coined. Their practices demonstrate that intensive agriculture and environmental stewardship can coexist when guided by wisdom and long-term thinking. The educational curricula that incorporate onion studies reveal their place in formal Egyptian learning systems. You observe students in scribal schools learning mathematics through onion-based problems, studying geometry through onion structure analysis, and exploring philosophical concepts through onion metaphors. The integration of onion studies into educational programs demonstrates the Egyptian understanding that practical knowledge and abstract learning reinforce each other. Students who understand onions intimately have concrete foundations for understanding more abstract concepts in mathematics, philosophy, and science. The quality control systems developed for onion production and processing represent some of the earliest examples of systematic quality management. You observe inspectors using standardized criteria to evaluate onion quality, implementing consistent grading systems, and maintaining detailed records of quality trends over time. The standards developed for Egyptian onions influence quality expectations throughout their economy, creating a culture of excellence that extends far beyond agriculture into manufacturing, construction, and service sectors. The principles of quality control learned through onion production become foundational elements of Egyptian economic success. The therapeutic communities that form around onion cultivation and preparation provide social support systems for individuals dealing with various challenges. You observe how the shared work of onion processing creates opportunities for mutual support, informal counseling, and community problem solving. The recognition that working with onions can be emotionally and spiritually healing leads to the development of therapeutic programs that use onion-related activities to help people recovering from trauma, dealing with grief, or seeking personal transformation. These programs represent early examples of what modern psychology would recognize as horticultural therapy and occupational therapy. The research methodologies developed for studying onion properties and effects contribute to Egyptian understanding of systematic investigation and evidence-based practice. You observe researchers designing experiments, collecting data, and drawing conclusions about onion-related phenomena with methods that represent sophisticated early examples of scientific inquiry. The willingness to question traditional beliefs and test new hypotheses about onions demonstrates the Egyptian commitment to truth-seeking and continuous improvement. Their research methods influence approaches to investigation in other fields, contributing to the overall advancement of Egyptian knowledge and understanding. The cultural export of onion-related practices spreads Egyptian influence throughout the ancient world and contributes to their civilization's lasting legacy. You observe foreign students coming to Egypt to learn onion cultivation techniques, cooking methods, and preservation practices, returning to their home countries as ambassadors of Egyptian culture. The international adoption of Egyptian onion practices creates networks of cultural connection that facilitate trade, diplomacy, and intellectual exchange. These relationships help establish Egypt as a center of learning and innovation that influences world development for centuries. The conservation efforts undertaken to preserve onion varieties and maintain genetic diversity. You observe seed-saving practices, variety preservation programs, and efforts to document the characteristics of different onion types for future generations. The recognition that genetic diversity is essential for long-term agricultural success leads to systematic efforts to maintain broad collections of onion varieties with different characteristics and adaptations. These conservation efforts represent early examples of what modern science would recognize as genetic resource management. The philosophical frameworks developed around onion symbolism influence Egyptian thinking about fundamental questions of existence, reality, and meaning. You observe scholars using onion metaphors to explore concepts of apparent versus real, surface versus depth, and the relationship between parts and wholes. The accessibility of onion symbolism makes these philosophical concepts understandable to people at all levels of education and social position, democratizing wisdom in ways that strengthen the intellectual foundations of Egyptian civilization. The use of familiar, everyday objects to explore profound questions represents a pedagogical approach that maximizes the spread of knowledge and understanding. As your long journey through the onion-obsessed kitchens of ancient Egypt draws toward its close, you find yourself standing once again in that grand palace kitchen where this exploration began. But now you see it with completely different eyes. The morning sun streams through those same high windows, but the golden light now illuminates not just a busy workspace, but a sacred temple where generations of devoted practitioners have maintained traditions that connected them to forces larger than themselves, where every sliced onion was a prayer, every prepared meal a ritual offering, and every preserved bulb a promise of continued life through the long journey of seasons and years. The soft scraping of bronze knives against wooden cutting boards continues its ancient rhythm. But now you understand that this sound represents something far more profound than simple food preparation. It's the heartbeat of a civilization that found the sacred in the mundane, that understood the divine connections running through every aspect of daily life. than that built one of history's most enduring cultures on foundations of reverence for the seemingly simple gifts of earth and sun and human dedication. That's quite a journey we took tonight, wandering through those aromatic kitchens and discovering how something as humble as an onion could become the foundation for medicine, spirituality, art, commerce, and community in one of history's most remarkable civilizations. And honestly, after seeing how deeply those ancient cooks understood the layers of meaning in everything they touched, you might never look at your own kitchen the same way again. If you enjoyed this ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next. And definitely drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with cooking, your local time as you're listening to this, or just where in the world you're joining me from tonight. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your nights filled with wonder.